Good morning.
Good morning.
It's Thursday, which means it's Guest Thursday again. You survived your birthday, Dr. Mary.
I did.
Survived and thrived, I would say.
It was fantastic.
Yeah, lots of people wrote to wish you happy birthday. So that was very, very nice. And we did do all of your favorite things.
We did.
Do you know what Dr. Mary loves to do? He loves to go to furniture stores.
I did. And look at rugs too. So
yeah, it was a big day. We went to home and spent about an hour. And then, of course, we went to, when you're there, your family, the Olive Garden, because what says happy birthday more than the Olive Garden?
And then, of course, we saw a fantastic movie last night. We watched
2 nights ago. Oh, yeah, last night we watched Belfast.
The
night before, we watched When Worlds Collide. And then we ended the evening with a Nicole's cheesecake. So it was a pretty good birthday.
It's fantastic. Calorific at the
yes. At
the rear end.
Yeah.
But there you go.
It's all right. So, plus we have to say a shout out to Brandy. Yesterday morning in spin class, I sent her some songs.
Bless her. Yes.
And she played Baggy Trousers from Madness and Laid from James, which was super fun.
It did confuse the Gen Zers in the group who didn't have probably the first 2-tone ska song they've ever heard in their lives.
Yeah, it was quite an introduction to the other women in the class, but it was a great way to start your birthday. So thanks to all of you who wrote in to wish Maz a happy birthday as well. It was fun. So last week we had Kayla Stenstrom on, and Kevin's story was so fabulous.
Yeah, it was.
I don't know. Yeah. It was really honest in beautiful ways. And all of our guests are beautiful. We're not ranking them. We're not prioritizing them. But Kevin really struck a chord.
Yes, he certainly did.
A lot of people. So we're really thrilled that his wife, Kayla, is joining us today live to have this conversation. Because as I said in the notes, alcoholism and addiction is a family disease. You might not all suffer with it, but you all suffer because of it. So let's bring Kayla on and get her take on this side of it. Hi, Kayla.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning. Nice to see you.
You too.
Thanks so much for joining us. We're assuming you watched Kevin's conversation last week.
I did. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you have thoughts on it as you were listening to it?
I don't know. He was calm and straightforward, and I wasn't surprised by that. That's what he is. But it was fun to hear him talk about his experience with other people, because I don't always know if our conversations are how he would present it to the world. So it was good to watch.
Good. Well, we sure enjoyed it. And we really appreciate that you reached out and said, hey, Kevin and I would be on your show. So that was great. Thank you for that. So, Kayla, let's just jump in and talk about it from your side of the story. How long have you and Kevin been married?
11 years.
And so did you know when you got married that you were marrying someone who came from this long history of addiction?
Yeah, I knew his family history. Yep. So his parents had been, in recovery since before he was born, and uncles and grandparents. So for sure, I don't think I knew when we got married that it would be an issue for Kevin, because I think when we got married, we were still drinking with our friends. So we didn't I didn't think anything of it. Until he told me, which I can explain more about, but yeah.
So go ahead and do that, Kayla, because I think one thing that was very, very different from our experience is that Maz didn't exactly elect to quit drinking.
No.
Sort of, but not the same way Kevin did. So let's talk about sort of that lead up to that night when Kevin was home with your daughter, I think.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting because the night that Kevin considers a turning point is not really the points that I necessarily remember as being critical points of the journey. So one thing I was surprised about with his talk is that he made it very clear that he, you know, hasn't been completely sober for 8 years, but he didn't really talk about one, like his most major relapse. And I know that he's okay with me sharing. I checked.
Okay.
But as the partner, that relapse was more pivotal for me than the first time that he quit drinking. And I think the reason for that is because the first time we had been married for about 2 years or so, and I didn't really notice much because like we would drink occasionally with friends, and I'm not much of a drinker, so you know, I'd have a drink or two, and thought that he was kind of at that point too, because he was really good at, like, you couldn't really tell. And so he would be having a lot more than me. And I would ask how much he had, and he would lie. And then he was fine during the next day, and that was that. And just little things like, I mean, big things, but seemed little at the time. So I'd keep what I thought was like one bottle of an alcohol in the freezer. So like a bottle of whiskey or a bottle of rum. And I thought it was the same bottle for months, because I can leave something in the freezer for months and like never, like I just forget about it. But he would drink it and replace it, and I didn't know. So, and I think I probably started to notice things like, you know, have you heard, is that your fourth beer or your second beer, you know? But there were some moments for me that were more pivotal. Like one of Kevin's best friends got married, and at the wedding, Kevin got pretty out of control, and said some hurtful things, and that's when our friends began to notice it. But the really scary part was that he didn't remember any of it the next morning. Like our friends and I had to say, this is what you did last night. And he was like super apologetic and embarrassed and had no idea. And then I just started to notice that he wasn't like super fun, silly drunk Kevin. He was just kind of angry, defensive drunk. But that first time he came to me, he just one day said, "Hey, I'm pretty sure I'm an alcoholic." And I said, "Okay, let's tackle that." And to be fair, I think at that point in time, early in our marriage, I had some major growing up to do. I had some issues of my own that were a strain on our marriage. And so we just kind of decided, like, you need to work on things, I need to work on things. Let's confront them together as one big yucky, messy pile and grow together. And I know it sounds like sweet and idolized now, but it was honestly just blunt and practical. Like you work on this, I work on this, and here we go. So that's how it was for a few years. And cut me off anytime if I'm just
this is so interesting. Your story. Keep going. We will if we need to. We don't need to.
Okay.
Only stop if you begin to feel uncomfortable for
Yeah.
So let's see, probably 6 years ago, Kevin was home from work for a day fixing his vehicle, and he had dropped me off at work because he needed our second vehicle to pick up some supplies. And so it was towards the end of the workday, and I got a call from Amy, who was our dear friend who coordinated children and family ministry programs at our church. We'd known her for years through camp where we met. And she called me, again, I was at work, and she said, "Kayla, I'm here with Kevin. He is drunk and you should come." Whew. And it was like totally, from my perspective, out of the blue. Like I didn't expect it at all. So I started crying, and then my coworker Monica came in to the office, took one look at my face and said, "You know, what do you need?" And she drove me. So Kevin was actually at church. And so she brought me to church and dropped me off, and we sat with Amy, who kind of mediated and talked, and Kevin was pretty drunk. And it was kind of interesting because talking with him about it now, he said, I asked, "Why did you go to Amy? Because you thought if you went to a friend, they would tell me, and then I would find out, and you wouldn't have to tell me yourself. You know, like the conclusion would happen, but in an easier way. And he says that he doesn't really even think of that. Like he just knew it had to stop, and Amy was the one that he trusted to go to. So so we're at church. He's drunk. I'm confused and angry and scared. And I think that the reason I remember that moment more, because that was, kind of just one step along Kevin's journey. But the reason that it was more impactful for me is because that at that point in our lives, it was more destructive. Like we were immersed in our careers. Our daughter was 4, and we actually had already actively made the choice to have a second child. So from my perspective, it was like, how can you be ready to bring another person into this world when you have this going on? And so, I mean, he had been drinking for around a month or so, and been hiding it. And that night was interesting because Kevin, when we asked him, what's the next step here, he basically begged to go to Prairie St. John's. And I was surprised he didn't bring that up in his last talk too, and I'll explain why. But so that night, so we drove. I took him to Prairie St. John's, which Dr. Mary, I believe you went there as well, right? Yeah. And so we had kind of a different experience. So when I brought him there, it was in the late evening, and they did an intake. And they assigned him to an outpatient program. And Kevin was pretty upset because he wanted inpatient. Like he wanted to stay to fix it. He was like, commit me until I'm done. And they kept me present during the intake, which we, like, looking back, wonder if it would have been different if I hadn't been in the room, because I don't think he was able to be as frank with his answers. With me like sitting right next to him.
Right there. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what he did. So he did an outpatient program. I don't remember. It was maybe 6 weeks or something every day, like the end of after work. And he learned about his triggers, and some skills, but I think it was a lot like AA, where he didn't get a whole lot out of it because he was treated like he wasn't bad enough. He's with all these people who are like, have lost their jobs or lost their homes. Some of them they're on like prison release, and it's, he was kind of like, he was like the good one. And so he didn't get a whole lot of support. But I mean, for the most part has been sober since. And I say most part because there's only one other night that I know of that he's drank. And I asked him to his face, and he lied twice. And then the third time I was like, here's your moment. Like, I know. And then he said, yes, I've been drinking. And that night in particular, we just called our friends to come get the kids, and we talked it out. And it doesn't really, I don't really need to know if there have been other times, because honestly, it doesn't really matter, because I think it's like how Kevin has stated it. Like our goals are like, he was sober yesterday and today, and will be tomorrow. And I don't need to know if once, like 3 years ago, he had a drink and didn't tell me, because it doesn't change how we approach the situation.
Wow. That is really, really interesting.
Does that feel comfortable for you?
Oh, that's a good question.
Or does it set off alarm signals right back in the base of your brain that you have trouble with?
I think trust is kind of an interesting thing. Like I thought a lot about trust before this conversation, and I think I wasn't upset the first time because he came to me. And then I think, I had felt a little bit betrayed about the secrets, but it was like, it is what it is. And you've been very self-aware. Let's work through this. With the relapse, it was harder. And I sat with that, with anger and fear, and then just numbness for a few days. Like, I think it was a good 48 hours where I didn't want to be around him or talk to him. But that passed really quickly because I think that the either the lies or the personality characteristics when your partner is drunk or manipulation, it's not even that person. Like, to me, it's like compartmentalized. Like, there can be this person who wants to have another child with you at the same time that he's drinking, and those are like two separate parts of that person. Like I can want to be a father and I can be an alcoholic, and those can coincide. And I just quickly realized that it's not about me. And I know that sounds like grand and selfless, but it's just, I don't mean it in that way. I just mean alcoholism just really has very little to do with the partner. It affects the partner, but it doesn't. For me, I found that being worried about it or being angry about it didn't progress. It didn't help. Like it, yeah.
I'm trying. I've never heard anybody articulate this quite like this.
Well, thank
Kayla.
you. I didn't mean to put you on the spot there.
No,
but
that's fine.
Does this work for you?
Yeah.
Thing that came out of that.
It's super interesting that it kind of turned me on my head a little bit in a good way, because I also like, I don't wake up and think, oh my gosh, will Maz drink today? I never think about it, despite the fact that we talk about it publicly twice a week and then all these other times. I don't like, we didn't go out to eat last night for his birthday, and I thought, oh my gosh, I hope he has a non-alcoholic beer. I don't think about it. I have 100% trust that he's not drinking.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know how I would respond if you came to me, let's say Sunday afternoon. I have to go do a thing this upcoming Sunday. If I came home and you said to me at bedtime, I need you to know I walked across the street to Bernie's and I bought a 6-pack and drank it. I don't know what my response would be, because today that is as inconceivable to me as if he were to say to me, I want you to know that I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro this morning.
Sure.
What are you talking about? No.
Yeah.
So I never think about it because A, I have complete faith that you won't drink, and B, I understand that maybe that's misplaced, but until it's proven misplaced, I have no choice but to trust it.
Yeah. And I think you can't really survive unless you have that perspective. But I think there's an important distinction to make, which is that, first of all, I didn't do a ton of research about alcoholism or join AlAnon, which I'm sure would have been helpful. It probably still would be helpful for me to join groups like that. But I guess I understood what Kevin was thinking and how his addiction played out in his mind and in his behavior, because he told me. Like, he didn't say, you don't understand, and then shut down. Like, he verbally walked me through what was going on in his head. So I learned a lot from him verbal processing that. And then, there's been little tidbits along the way too. I'm sure, I don't know if you've read Brene Brown, Dana, but she describes guilt and shame as different. Like, guilt is I've done something bad, and shame is I am bad, and shame is what addiction has. So as a partner, you're thinking, don't they feel guilty for like lying to me or keeping these secrets? But it's not necessarily guilt, it's shame, and shame can do crazy things. Like, it can make a person do anything to avoid being found out, right? Do anything to avoid facing the truth. And shame is about that person, right? So here I am, you should feel guilty about me, but it's not even really about me, I guess. Yeah.
I'm astonished at how sort of self-actualized you are, Kayla. You may not be as young as you look. You look like you're about I'll be generous, 22. So I know you're not that young. But you're young. You're young to be in this place.
But I mean, it does come down to the fact, and I'm not speaking for you. I'm going to ask you this question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think the fact that you have to trust your person,
Kevin?
I know Kevin is. I'm just trying to be
okay, sorry.
You know, your significant other, to the point where they say, all right, today I didn't drink, tomorrow I hope I don't drink. Yesterday, the day before that, I didn't drink. And you build up a trust. Do you think that did it hurt more even when Kevin admitted it to you? Because you had to trust him to get through your day, that it hurt more?
I think it would hurt way
betrayal.
I think it would hurt way more to find out again. Like we've had some frank conversations about that major relapse where it's like if I have to find out like that again, I don't know if we'll survive. Like, but if you come to me tomorrow and say, I've been drinking the last 2 weeks, then I'm going to say, okay, let's deal with this. And that will still be a big difference. Like if we continue to have these periods where he lied and I found out, and he lied and I found out, like that, a marriage can't survive over time with that. But I do think a marriage can survive with, hey, I messed up today. Let's work on it. Like those are two very different, I think. So I think and it's not that I would say I don't think about it on a daily basis. The only times I worry is like, you know, Kevin mentioned his triggers are like being alone in the car. Yeah. So like if he's off doing something and he's gone longer than I expected, there is that little trigger that's like, oh, he's been gone for an hour or two longer than I thought. And he left in his car. Maybe he's sitting in a parking lot having a beer. And it's not like I never, ever think that, but it's only really when it's like related to a trigger that I know is a real thing. And it's pretty rare and far between.
Yeah. Wow. So one of the things that was super important for me in terms of us was figuring out that I had stuff to work on too.
Yes.
And so I really love that idea of when it first happened, you both said, all right, you got stuff, I got stuff, make a stuff pile and figure it out. Because I do think that there's a little part of a lot of us, I think, that sort of likes to be the good one, and they're the bad one, or they're the broken one, or the one who made all the mistakes. And while I can certainly say that the drinking was the crux of 95% of our problems, I also brought problems to the table, which exacerbated the drinking.
Right.
And so that is really smart of you, I think, to just be able to say, yeah, I don't drink my problem, but I got problems.
Yes.
Because that's true for all of us.
Yeah. And I think like I think we all also have some serious like communication things to learn as we go. So like I learned quickly on that if I like asked how many drinks he had or demanded or pleaded or threatened, none of that worked. Like it just made him more defensive. Yeah. And so I honestly don't know what the answer is if he hadn't met me halfway, like seeking connection, because if he wouldn't have worked together with me, I don't have an answer for that. And that's hard for me a little bit, because there are listeners probably to this conversation that maybe don't have a partner that meets halfway, and I don't know what the answer to that is. But for Kevin and I, we learned that you have to, like, honestly, you have to say the really shitty things. like you have to say things to each other that hurt to say and hurt to hear. And we're still learning that, but that, you know, that it's that communication aspect that you're talking about where you you both dive in.
Yeah, your point about a partner meeting you halfway. So I think I said this last week, but I went to a couple of AlAnon meetings years into Maz's sobriety. So I went in September of 2020. He got sober in February of 2017. And that was the deal breaker for me with AlAnon, is that there were some fabulous people on that call, but I felt like I couldn't relate to them because it felt to me like their partners weren't meeting them even a tenth of the way. And I don't want to be judgy because I didn't spend enough time with them to truly know their stories. And just because it didn't look like enough to me doesn't mean it wasn't enough for them.
Yeah.
But I just was saddened to listen to them talk about the relationship they had with their partners, because I thought, for me, the drinking would not have been the problem. The problem in those relationships would have been that person's not with you. That person's not communicating with you or supporting you. Yep. They drink all they want. They're not there. And so I think that's a really, really valuable point. I want to put this comment up, Kayla, just because I want to be sure that you see it, because it's absolutely, absolutely true. Wow. You're a very surprising human being. You have a level of generosity I've not really encountered with many people.
Well, and this is all like, I want everyone to keep in mind that this is like years of growth, right? Yeah. And I think part of it is probably, some of it is our background too. We both, so we met at a camp where you can't survive without effective communication. So, we both come, so I was a youth director for some time. And so we have a church faith component to our relationship too. And I don't mean to say that like faith got us through or something profound, but I do mean that effective relationships got us through. So supportive parents, supportive friends, people who modeled a communication for us, so that by the time we got married and this came about, and of course we never expected this to happen, but by the time it came about, we kind of knew that we either were going to talk about it or we were going to get divorced.
Yeah. Wow. Anything else from you, Dr. Mary?
I had to go to rehab to learn how to reassess my own self and grow. And you seem to have this marvelous knack of just knowing how to do that. So I'm actually really impressed. I had no idea. I don't know. It was, for me, it was, it was the shame too. I mean, deep down, I knew there was something wrong with me, but it was still shameful to admit. So I had to get over my own self to actually even look at the first hurdle. How do I get over this? I had no idea, but you seem to have a strength of character that you just know what to do and how to do it and when you need to do it.
Well, and thank you. But I mean, honestly, maybe even some of it is just fascination with how the mind works, right? So like I think it's super interesting what shame can do, or I think it's really interesting how the brain compartmentalizes when you're an addict, like fight and flight takes over and nothing else matters. Or so maybe some of it too is just both Kevin and I being interested in the process that happens to the brain and like educating ourselves, kind of nerding out on that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, it's worked. And I'm listening to you talk and I'm thinking, as I so often think, the noun we're using is alcohol, but it could be anything. The breakdown of communication is what destroys probably 95% of relationships, parent-child, colleagues, marriages. It doesn't matter. It's our inability or our unwillingness to honestly come to the communication table and say, here's what I'm thinking, and then shut up and listen.
Yep.
That makes so many of our problems become insurmountable. So this conversation has been just incredibly illuminating.
Yes, it has, actually.
In terms of just thinking about, this is the thing that's at our house. This is how we're working through it. End of story.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think it's been, I'm glad that we went through a good chunk of this when our daughter Callie was still young, because she's now battling some pretty intense depression and anxiety issues. And coming from a family with a history of addiction, we're like, all right, we gotta pack this girl with so many skills we gotta equip her now so that when she's a teenager and adult, she's ready. But I think it's helped us be really frank and communicative with her and to teach her to talk through things. So I'm just really thankful that a lot of this happened before our kids were significantly older.
Yeah.
So that we had time to prepare and to improve our own communication. Yeah.
Well, I think we could go on and on about how incredible this conversation is, but I think that's been conveyed to our audience. And I think that our watching audience and everybody who watches this later will leave with the same level of just, wow, you've given us so much to think about, Kayla. We really appreciate you joining us and reaching out in the first place. This has been a just really powerful 2-part conversation. I've learned a ton.
Yeah, I have too.
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah, we have too. I mean, this is probably the first time we've talked. I mean, our friends know, but we haven't probably this openly talked about it. And so when I heard that you guys were doing a podcast, it grabbed my attention because I'm sick of people not talking about it. Honestly, I'm so over the picture perfect family, and I do that too on Facebook or wherever, all these beautiful pictures of our family, but I get sick of it. I want to say, look at the crap we're going through. Are you going through this crap? Great. I'm so glad we're not alone.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. And that's really why we did it, because I felt like, wow, our highlight reel is pretty extraordinary. But look what we went through that nobody knows about to get to the highlight reel.
Yeah.
And you can have a highlight reel that still has junk interspersed on the highlight reel. And that's just being human.
Mm-hmm.
So I couldn't agree with you more. The highlight reel only matters if you know that there's a B-side or this cutting room floor stuff. And that's just reality. And reality is where I want to live.
Exactly.
Me too. All right. Ronnie has one more comment for you. Yeah, I would agree. I think you can feel very comfortable saying in our particular case, faith has played a role in that. I don't think that it doesn't necessarily apply to every person and every couple, but if it applies to you, it applies to you. And I think it's very clear that it applies to you.
Yeah. I mean, it's no accident that when Kevin relapsed, church is where he ran.
That's amazing.
But we also don't believe that you can pray away your difficulties. I don't think if I just have enough faith, they'll go away. I think God equips us and gives us the people in our lives, but prayer is to get our mind in check, and then
you got to do the work.
Yeah.
I will say you must go to a really incredible church that he felt like that was the place to go, because I think a lot of churches, not all churches, but a lot of churches are fairly judgy of things like this.
For sure. Yeah.
That's where he went. Says a lot about the people and the mission of that building.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Kayla, we will let you go. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you both too.
Wow. Well, I'm going to be thinking about this for many, many days. So have an excellent day. Everybody else, Tuesday.
See you later.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.